operational update on our operations in Haiti. U.S. and coalition troops maintain security at the Kabul airport. And this security continues to allow for the evacuation operations and allowing us to remain to process people in to become ready to fly. Our focus is continuing to get as many people out as efficiently and safely as possible. In the past 24 hours, we exceeded the previous 24-hour flight departures and evacuated a number of passengers nearing the previous day's record. Yesterday, 42 U.S. military aircraft, of which were 37 C-17s and 5 C-130s, departed with approximately 11,200 personnel. Combined with our 48 coalition and allied partners, with those departures, an additional 7,800 personnel left Kabul. That is 90 flights total yesterday that left the Kabul airport. That is accounted for 19,000 evacuees now safely out of Afghanistan within a 24-hour period. Since the U.S. and coalition forces began the evacuation, to date, approximately 88,000 have safely departed from Afghanistan. Every 39 minutes yesterday, a plane departed Kabul airport. These numbers are a testament to the hard-working and brave service members carrying out this mission. In cooperation with the State Department, I can also tell you that there are more than 10,000 people currently at this time at the airport awaiting departure. This is a snapshot in time, and as we said yesterday, will continue to change as more people are able to come onto the airfield and as flights depart. As I said yesterday, in order for this throughput to remain steady, we depend on the capacity and efficiency of our intermediate staging bases and safe havens. We are appreciative of the support and rely on our allies and partners in this global endeavor. In the EUCOM AOR, 6 flights will transport about 1,800 vulnerable Afghans from Germany to the United States today. In addition, approximately 2,000 more will arrive. In this case, Ramstein Air Base, Germany, is scheduled to receive approximately 13 flights. Since August 20th, EUCOM has assisted approximately 10,000 vulnerable Afghans and evacuees for transit to onward locations. You will likely hear more details today at planned press schedule with Mr. Kirby and planned for General Walters later today. Several thousand evacuees have arrived in the United States so far and will continue to do so. In the past 24 hours, 5 flights landed at Dulles International Airport with approximately 1,200 passengers. As part of this process, these individuals completed biometric vetting and screening in accordance with the FBI, NCTC, and Customs and Border Control standards, all directed by the Department of Homeland Security. We are working around the clock to provide safe, sanitary, and appropriate receptions at processing at all of our locations throughout the world. We know you have questions about our current timeline and intent for departure. Our mission remains unchanged. For each day of this operation, we have carried out the direction of the President and the Secretary of Defense. Until that mission changes, we will continue to put forth our maximum effort to safely evacuate as many people as possible, and we will keep you updated. Lastly, I want to give you a short update on Haiti. The Department of Defense and U.S. Southern Command continue to be in full support of USAID as the lead federal agency. The USAID Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance team has been on the ground since the beginning, and we've been supporting them since then, as have a lot of our allies and partners, working with international community to identify points of need. This life-saving aid and assistance mission is where DoD's unique capabilities, specifically in airlift, and logistics are engaged each day to get that life-saving aid where it needs to be rapidly. As of late last evening, JTF Haiti has conducted over 364 full-spectrum missions, both with the DoD assets and the United States Coast Guard, which have assisted or saved over 436 lives and delivered over 163 pounds of vital aid as of late yesterday. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Just one more note, and then we'll get to questions. I think you may have seen now we have released the Secretary's memo with respect to mandatory vaccinations for COVID-19. He has determined, after careful consultation with medical experts and military leadership, and of course with the support of the President, that mandatory vaccination against the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, is necessary to protect the safety of our service members and our force. Mandatory vaccination will only use COVID-19 vaccines that receive full licensure from the Food and Drug Administration in accordance with FDA-approved labeling and guidance. Mandatory vaccination requirements will be implemented consistent with DoD Immunization Program Instruction 6205.02. In other words, the existing structure and regulations that govern policies and procedures for managing mandatory vaccination across the force. This is consistent with the Department's efforts to ensure the safety of our service members and, again, to maintain the readiness of the force. With that, we'll take questions. Bob.
John, thank you. With regard to Afghanistan, I wonder if you could give us a sense of what the evacuation endgame is likely to look like or expected to look like in terms of sort of the sequence of events over the last, say, 3 or 4 or 5 days. Will the U.S. Need to have sort of exclusive use of the fields and the apparatus to execute the final flights?
I'll ask the General to probably be more specific than me, Bob, but what we anticipate happening in the last couple of days, so first of all, we will continue to evacuate needed populations all the way to the end, if we have to and we need to. If you're an evacuee that we can get out, we're going to continue to get you out.
On the 31st.
Right up until the end. But in those last couple of days, we're going to try to preserve as much capability as we can at the airport, as you might imagine. So in those last couple of days, we will begin to prioritize military capabilities and military resources to move out. That doesn't mean that that if you're an evacuee and you need to get out, that we're not going to try to get you out, but that we will have to reserve some capacity in those last couple of days to prioritize the military footprint leaving, because we want to be able to keep it there as long as possible to do the job that it's intended to do.
So the charter flights, for example, would be finished earlier, and when you refer to military resources, you're talking about American only?
I'm talking about primarily U.S. military troops and equipment. We are now and have been working with our allies and partners to help them withdraw their people, and will help them withdraw their forces as well.
Right to the very end, or you have to do that earlier?
Well, look, I mean, obviously we want to preserve as much capability as possible, and some of that capability is not ours. Some of it is our allies and partners. So there'll be a balance there, and it'll be up to Admiral Vasely to determine how he strikes that balance in terms of making sure he has the maximum capability for as long as possible. So there will be a transition more towards getting military assets out as we get closer to the end. But again, we're going to continue to work the evacuation mission right up until the last day.
Just, I think what I would add for the great answer Mr. Kirby gave there is, as you've seen in the last 3 days, the complexity and the amount of aircraft moving in and out. So the capability to continue to sequence and plan for the actual requirements that leave on a daily basis is going to be made, on the ground. But as you've seen, we have that capability to manage quite a lot of throughput and be able to put the right, things on those aircraft as they come in and as they leave.
Jen?
John, who is guarding the U.S. Embassy right now? Who will guard after the U.S. military pulls out? Are there any contingencies? Do you have an agreement with the Taliban? And in terms of the airport, do you have an agreement with any NATO allies to keep, like the Turks, to keep the airport open after the U.S. military pulls out?
So as I understand it, I know there's no military assets guarding the embassy compound. The U.S. Embassy is operating out of Hamid Karzai International Airport. As for the Turks, they are still on the ground at the airport, assisting in this security mission that we have there. I won't speak for their intentions one way or another going forward, but there's not going to be when the mission is over and when we are leaving the airport will not be the United States our responsibility anymore. So how it gets managed going forward will be something that the Taliban, who are now in Kabul, will have to manage them on their own with them, and I assume with the international community. But that won't be an American responsibility.
And just one more, how many individuals on terror watch lists have been screened or found at any of the screening points, either in Qatar, Ramstein, or in the U.S.?
I don't know. We'll have to take that question and get back to you. Nazira?
Thank you, John. Thank you, General. On behalf of Afghan people, thank you very much for your hard job and good job, actually.
Thank you.
And Afghan people, they are happy, but some of them, that they are not eligible for SIV visa, P1, P2, but still they have a serious problem. And they are not in the Kabul. They are hiding. They move from one place to the other place. And they contact with me, like more than 100 people contacted with me a day, that what can we do? And I say, I'm nobody to do something. There is any plan from the State Department or from the Pentagon, because they're under target of the Taliban. But as Taliban yesterday, the spokesperson, Mujahid, said that why United States make a problem for us. We are not allowed the people to leave Afghanistan. Now they are in jail. On the other hand, Taliban is not one group. They are different groups, like 5 groups. And a lot of people there under problem, but they are not eligible for those visas. There's a possibility and any other option for them to be safe.
Nazira, I can't speak for each and every Afghan who wants to leave and is dealing with their own individual circumstances to get out. We know there are a lot of desperate people who want to leave, and that's why we are working as fast as we can. And you saw the numbers that we continue to be able to get out. We're working as fast as we can to get out American citizens, special immigrant visa applicants, and vulnerable Afghans, and we continue to work at this. I can't begin to try to give you specific advice on what these individuals ought to do. I certainly would encourage them to reach out to the State Department, but from the Pentagon's perspective, we're doing the best we can as fast as we can to move as many people as we can out on any given day. But I'm not able to. And I know my answer is unsatisfying, and I apologize for that, but I'm not able to speak to our ability to reach out and touch every single Afghan that wants to get out. Believe me, we're very mindful of the plight here, and we're trying the best we can to alleviate that.
Thank you.
Carla.
Thank you. I just want to follow up to what Jen was asking about. You said that there won't be a military presence guarding an embassy. So post-August 31st.
The embassy compound. She specifically asked about the embassy compound, which we are not operating out of right now.
Post-August 31st, after that date, can you just explicitly say there will be no diplomatic presence, U.S. diplomatic presence post-August 31st? We will not have an embassy.
I can't speak for that. That's a State Department issue.
And then to follow up, there's been reports that somebody who was affiliated with ISIS got on one of the flights. What's going on with that individual?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen similar press reporting on this. I just don't have anything to update you on that. I don't have any information. And what I should have said to Jen was that's really a better question put for the Department of Homeland Security. But we'll see if we can track down something for you. I'm not trying to evade it. I just don't know. We're doing the best we can to manifest people on these flights and get them out as fast as possible. There is screening being done, not by DOD, but by DHS, immigration, intelligence officials are doing the screening for people as they go on for onward flights. We're really focused on trying to get as many of these individuals out.
And then one last one, just the same question I had yesterday. Have there been any air extractions in Kabul, any additional ones since the two that you guys have told us about? And have there been any efforts outside of Kabul to extract Americans and at-risk Afghans?
Yeah, so last night during the period of darkness, there was an operation to be able to go out and safely evacuate evacuees back into Kabul. They are at H-Kaya, and they're safely there preparing to be evacuated.
So when you said, was it in Kabul and then they brought them into the airport, or was it?
It was outside of the airfield, in a way that, and we were able to bring them back to Kabul safely, and they are preparing for evacuation.
Bring it back to the airport.
To the airport, yeah.
It was inside Kabul, David.
Americans?
Was that a helicopter operation?
It was.
Okay. Can you tell us how many?
We're not going to provide specific details. Less than 20.
American?
Less than 20.
Less than 20. I'm not going to provide additional details.
So can I ask, that wasn't the question I was going to ask. Yesterday it was reported that the withdrawal had already begun and several hundred troops had already come out. And you pushed back on that, saying that these were people whose functions were no longer needed. But, you know, all withdrawals sort of begin with pulling out non-essential personnel first. Why shouldn't we view that as clearing the decks for the hardcore withdrawal that is going to come here?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I wasn't pushing back on headlines that said withdraw. I was simply trying to describe what happened without hyperbole. So let me just back up. What happened was the commander on the ground, Admiral Vasely, in trying to manage time and space at the airport, determined that it was the prudent thing to do to let several hundred troops leave the airport. Some of these troops did come in with the troops that were added for the non-combatant evacuation, the 5,800. Some of them were troops that were already there at Hamid Karzai International Airport before any additional troops flowed in for the non-combatant evacuation. And as you know, David, we were still in the process. Before there was a need to go in and do a non-combatant evacuation, we were still in the process of a drawdown at the airport under the previous plan by the end of the month. And so some of the troops that flew home yesterday were in that tranche. And so they were very much a part of the original drawdown plan. And Admiral Vasely saw fit that there was some others that he believed that he didn't need there at the airport anymore, even though they had flown in with the plus up for the NEO. And these are headquarters staff personnel, some maintainers, and some other enabling forces who either had completed their mission and were already scheduled to go, as I said, even before there was a non-combatant evacuation, and others who Admiral Vasely determined that their mission was complete. He didn't need them anymore. And again, time and space are a premium at the airport. He has the authority to make that decision. So I wasn't pushing back on the fact that the withdrawal has been going on since April 14th. When the president announced it, I wasn't pushing back. I just wanted to make it clear that that we hadn't pushed some button and said, go retrograde now. We still have on the ground about 5,400 of the 5,800 that we reached at the maximum. And Admiral Vasely has the authorities to manage in a prudent way his force management on the ground. I haven't gone to the phones, and I want to make sure I don't forget that. Jeff Shogel.
Thank you very much. From talking to military groups, it is evident that the Taliban are still blocking Afghans from gaining entrance to Hamid Karzai International Airport. And even when Afghans make it onto the airport, there have been instances when they have been escorted off due to paperwork issues. So I'd like to know, what steps is the U.S. government taking to make sure that Afghans do have safe passage to the airport? And under what circumstances are Afghans with valid visas who are admitted to the airport ultimately escorted off of the airport grounds?
Jeff, it's difficult for us to answer that here at the Pentagon when we're not at the gates and on the ground at the airport. What I would tell you is a couple of things, and I recognize that no process is perfect, and that there are. I'm not disputing at all the accounts that you're relaying here today. That there may be hiccups and problems. We certainly recognize that. But let me just take a couple of steps back and tell you how this is working. And we've talked about this before. We have consular officers. Now there's more than 30 at the airport stationed at the gates with American troops who are helping them do their job of processing individuals as they come in, checking credentials, making sure that they are who they say they are, and that they are in a valid group that we're trying to move onto the airport grounds. Outside of that, the Taliban have set up checkpoints. We've talked about this before, and we are in daily communication with Taliban commanders about who we want to see get in and what the credentials are, what they look like, what's valid, and that communication happens literally every day. We have been nothing but open with the Taliban about who we expect them to let in. Again, fully recognize that it's that not every step of this process is in our firm control, and that there are going to be instances where it doesn't work as advertised. But I can tell you that there isn't a single day that goes by where Admiral Vasely and General Donahue aren't working this in a very personal way with Taliban authorities outside the airport. Let me go with another one on the phone. Tara.
Thank you for doing this, John. Yesterday, the president mentioned also that he was calling upon the department to create contingency plans in case the number of Americans and Afghans that still need to get out have not gotten out by the 31st. Can you just explain kind of what the department is thinking about what its options might be to continue to get Americans out after the 31st if they haven't made it to the airport by then? And then just to follow on Jeff's question with Afghans that aren't getting through, have discussions gone on with the Taliban to maybe find some negotiation space for? They've said, no more Afghans can leave, but clearly, there's 10,000 at the airport. So something is happening behind the scenes that's helping some people get through. Can you talk about that to some extent?
I'll turn it over to the General.
Yeah, so I'll start with that last question first. It kind of comes off of some things that Mr. Kirby just said with that constant communication. I know the most senior commanders on the ground are out and discussing with the Taliban leaders that are manning these checkpoints exactly what the documentation needs to look like, times and coordination, details of that. As we know, though, there are reports of that some that aren't able to get through there. And I can tell you that the Department of State, the consular affairs officers that are there, are working with our commanders there to ensure that documentation, names, and those things, as often as required, are being communicated to the Taliban that are out those checkpoints to allow transition in there to get into the gates.
And then, Tara, on contingency plans, obviously, I'm not going to get ahead of the planning process. We are a planning organization. One of our main jobs is to make sure that the president has options. And as he made clear yesterday, he wants to see this mission complete by the end of the month. We are still working towards that goal, but we will be drafting up potential, what we call in the military, branches and sequels. If, in fact, we believe a conversation needs to be had later on in the month that the timeline might need to be extended. For what purpose? For what number? For how long? All of that is baked into the planning process, and I'm just not going to get ahead of what the planners are doing. Courtney.
Two for you, John. So I'm still unclear about, at the very end of this, so the 30th, 31st, who's going to be doing security at the airport as those last U.S. troops are leaving. Is there an agreement, or it sounded as if you were saying that the Taliban will be responsible for security as the last Americans are leaving?
No, I said the Taliban were responsible for running an airport that's in a city that they are now the titular heads of government there.
Running the airport and the security, right?
Courtney, when we are gone, the airport will no longer be secured by American forces. What that security looks like after we're gone, I can't speak to that.
Before the U.S. leaves, though,
we will
who will be doing it as the U.S. is. Let's say those last couple of aircraft leave with Americans. Who's running security, keeping those aircraft and the runways safe? Yeah.
So you're asking a very good tactical question, right? So security, which we would call a commander's inherent responsibility throughout every phase of the operation. We are continuing to secure ourselves to the very last requirement of that. So when you say who's securing the last flight and all those things, and we will have that ability to secure ourselves through multiple means to ensure flights are able to take off.
And then while I have you up there, I just want to clear one thing that you just said. You said that the most senior commanders on the ground are out and discussing things with the Taliban. Do you mean that Admiral Baseley and General Donahue are actually going to the checkpoints?
I don't want to give names and things that are going. I would just tell you commanders that have authority at echelon to be able to communicate. Because as we said, the most important thing is to be able to coordinate with the Taliban to get the right people through. We've seen that there's been, reports of not the right folks being able to get through. So every day we are ensuring that we can get as many people in as possible so that we can fly them to safety.
And then if I could just ask you one more, John, on the equipment that you were talking about earlier. So when you talk about transitioning towards getting military assets out, so obviously getting the people out, American military out, but will there be a point where you will have a decision, or General, whomever it is, McKenzie, Admiral Baseley, will have a decision about putting people on these aircraft or putting some of the equipment, artillery, CRAMs, all the equipment that's still at the airport there? And has there been a decision made to prioritize lives over military equipment?
Lives are always going to be the priority, period. But as we get closer to the end, there will be some equipment and systems that we will probably take with us as we leave. And the disposition of what we aren't taking with us, that'll be up to Admiral Baseley to determine how that stuff is handled. But lives will always be the chief priority throughout this entire process.
All nationalities' lives?
Lives will always be the priority throughout this process. Let me go over here, Idris.
Two quick questions. I think yesterday you did put out a statement saying about 4,000 Americans have been evacuated.
That's correct.
Is there an updated number, and do you have the sort of base number, how many have to be evacuated now?
It's right now today north of 4,400. And I don't have a specific number of total Americans that are still in need of leaving. I don't have that.
And just a quick follow-up: does the Secretary and I guess the Department at large find it helpful for two lawmakers to come to Kabul unannounced, or were you guys aware of it, and do you find it very helpful for them to be there?
We were not aware of this visit. And we are obviously not encouraging VIP visits to a very tense dangerous and dynamic situation at that airport and inside Kabul generally. And the Secretary, I think, would have appreciated the opportunity to have had a conversation before the visit took place.
Just how disruptive was it having them there?
They got a chance to talk to commanders, as I understand, and got a chance to talk to troops. But to say that there wasn't a need to flex and to alter the day's flow, including the need to have protection for these members of Congress, that would that wouldn't be a genuine thing for me to assert. I mean, there was certainly a pull off of the kinds of missions we were trying to do to be able to accommodate that visit.
But just to be clear, Congressman Moulton and Congressman Meyer, they took seats that would have been for refugees leaving, and they took time away from the mission.
They certainly took time away from what we had been planning to do that day. I don't know on the aircraft. They did fly out on a military aircraft. I honestly don't know what the seat capacity was on that aircraft, but they are out of the country now. Barb,
just one more question on withdrawal in the coming days. Since the president has said, setting contingency planning aside, that everyone will be out by August 31st. My question is, do you have in hand all the authorities, approvals, signed orders, whatever is necessary to just move ahead and carry that out? Or does the president, the secretary, General McKenzie, does somebody, General Milley, does somebody still have to sign an order to have that formal withdrawal begin?
Barb, without making it sound like I'm trying to gloss over your question, obviously we are tracking the end of the mission at the end of the month. And so, of course, General McKenzie has retrograde plans on the shelf and ready to go. But I can assure you that before that effort is undertaken in earnest, there will be a conversation with the Secretary of Defense, and Secretary Austin will have a chance to provide his guidance and direction with respect to retrograde. And I think I'll leave it at that.
So I'm sorry, I guess I don't understand, because the president made the decision to stick to the deadline of August 31st for all intents and purposes. And you have that from the commander-in-chief.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it I just don't get it. What is it that still has to happen to have the formal official withdrawal begin?
Yeah. And the president also said that he wanted the Pentagon to come up with contingency plans should there be a need to have a conversation about altering the timeline. So we are tracking towards the 31st. There are retrograde plans that have been drafted up. And the Secretary has seen them and is aware of them. But I think you would expect that in these final days, the Secretary will want to have the opportunity to issue specific direction to General McKenzie about going forward with those retrograde plans. We're going to try, as I said, we are focused on that date, but we are also focused keenly on making sure we get as many people out as fast as we can for as long as we can. And if there has to be alterations to that, then obviously Secretary Austin's going to want to be a part of that conversation and to be able to issue his guidance and direction to the commanders on the ground. Thank you. Christina.
Thank you. Can you confirm that no Americans have been killed since August 14th? And if there is any American killed through August 31st, how would that be announced?
Are you talking about American soldiers, troops?
Any American?
No, there have been no U.S. troops killed since the 14th, and we only know of one minor injury. I know of no American citizens who have been killed on this, so I don't know of any. Now, and we don't have perfect visibility into everything going on in Kabul, but we know of no American casualties.
And then just one more question. When exactly does the August 31st deadline take effect? Is that August 31st midnight, or is that September 1st midnight?
August 31st. Nancy.
I was wondering if you could clarify a couple of points that you made earlier for me. You mentioned that at some point the U.S. will prioritize getting military personnel out of Hamid Karzai International Airport. And I'm curious, given that, is there a point where Afghan nationals and U.S. citizens will not be allowed to get into the airport compound, the supposition being that you would have to have some sort of cutoff before you could then fly the final sort of troops out? And if so, when is that?
So I just want to go back to something I had said earlier about airflow, right? And as you've seen the capability over the last 3 days, over 90 aircraft total yesterday. So, and a lot focused on evacuation. So the way to answer that question is the commanders who will go forward with the plan of retrograde will have options, to make decisions on a daily, sometimes hourly basis of what loads are ready, what aircraft are ready, can I put something else on that bird? I mean, that's how fluid and, quite honestly, we are able to do that level of planning. And it goes back to the overall, mission here is continue to be able to get as many out as possible.
So I appreciate that. I think one reason I'm a little confused is it seems part of this is contingent on the Taliban and how they secure the area around the airport, who they let in, when they let them in. So I think one thing that would help me understand it better is who makes the final determination of security outside the airport? You mentioned that there are communications happening. But for example, if the U.S. wanted some kind of national in and the Taliban did not want to let them in, who makes that determination? How is it sorted out? Right
now, the airfield is secure to allow full operations, and do not assess that that is going to change right now. So that is our current planning, and we'll continue to go forward with that.
And Nancy, I think to sort of revisit what I said before, I mean, we've been very clear with Taliban leaders about what credentials we want them to accept. Remember, it's American citizens, it's SIV applicants, and it's vulnerable Afghans. And we have shared what the proper credentials are. And by and large, not saying it's been perfect, but by and large, the people that we have made clear to the Taliban that we want to have access through the checkpoints have been able to get through, by and large, again, with caveats. So it hasn't been a big problem to date. And as the general said earlier, I mean, we also have other means to go out and get people in if we need to. We've now done 3 rotary wing lifts, so we have that option available to us as well. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I don't mean to be thick about this. I'm just trying to understand how that communication happens. Let's say they're not letting in a certain credential that you believe should be let in. Right. How is that resolved?
Good question. And what would happen is the commanders on the ground would, if that was brought to their attention, and this has actually happened. This isn't notional. When we have reports that somebody who is properly credentialed is not being let in, or maybe they're family members, but they have proper credentials, we are making that clear to the Taliban leaders that, no, they are appropriate. You do need to let them in. And again, there's been a little give and take, and it's, I think it was Nazira who mentioned this earlier. I mean, not every checkpoint is manned in the same way and by the same individuals as every other one, and so there's variances at some of these checkpoints in terms of how the word has gotten down and how much the Taliban manning the checkpoint are following the dictates of their commanders. So that's why it's a constant communication on the ground with them to keep that flow going as much as possible. But yes, there are stops and starts. There are hurdles that have to be overcome almost on any given day. But really, it's a credit to the commanders on the ground there that they are continuing to have these conversations. Now, did that get at it better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right.
The Pentagon Briefing telling us more about the evacuation efforts that are now underway at a frantic pace. America has been trying to put out a brave front when it comes to the deadline, which is fast approaching, the 31st of August. The mission remains unchanged, is what the Pentagon has said. 90 flights leaving Kabul airport, left Kabul airport yesterday, 19,000 evacuated in the last 24 hours. As far as the evacuation numbers are concerned, a lot of those details remain sketchy, but at the same time, the pace at which the aircraft have been leaving Kabul, 39 minutes, one aircraft leaving Kabul every 39 minutes. Let's go straight across now to our correspondent, Susan Teherani, who's been tracking all those developments. Susan, first talking about how the Pentagon has made it clear that the Taliban will be managing the Kabul airport after the 31st of August. That is one crucial takeaway emerging from that press briefing.
That's right. We just saw the Pentagon conclude its press briefing, and the Pentagon spokesman John Kirby made very clear that the United States and its allies were not responsible for the security of the airport once the evacuation is complete, and the Taliban would be responsible for the security of the airport once the United States leaves Afghanistan. There were some talks and some question posed about who would assist the Taliban. Some say that it might be Turkey, but there was no concrete really discussion regarding that. The United States sort of tried to be evasive about that question, said it's not our responsibility and we're going to, pull out completely.
One thing that a lot of those questions also focused on, Susan, has been that the numbers have remained sketchy of allies, of those who helped the U.S. during that war, interpreters, journalists, the Afghans who have been allies all throughout. Apart from that, how many of those have valid documentation? All of these details have not come out as clearly as they should have.
Well, that's the situation at hand, and that's what we've been dealing with, really, as this hasty pullout really started. Was one press conference after the other. We're hoping to get answers on really how many Americans are in Afghanistan right now, and what we are hearing is how many are being taken out of Afghanistan and flown out of Afghanistan, but we're not really hearing how many numbers are still in Afghanistan. And we have to take into consideration that one of the reasons that this administration is continuously doing this is by not giving us an accurate number. Is as we reach the August 31st deadline, then it will be very difficult for accountability, not only on the part of the media, but on the part of Congress and in Washington as well, to really, first of all, try to locate these individuals in Afghanistan, Americans, vulnerable communities, but also, try to pose questions as to why and how they were left behind. So that's the main concern, and that's why this administration is continuously being pressed on numbers as the way that they've been really approaching it. They've been just giving us these, several thousand, several hundreds, and that's really that they do have accurate numbers. They're just not giving it to us.
Right, we're leaving it there for the moment. Susan Teherani, thanks very much for those updates. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.